Welcome to this second in a series of instructional videos for the SIM project. This particular video is called SIM Project Rules video, in which you will learn some of the nuances and rules associated with making decisions, hiring and firing, and assigning resources to tasks. Keep in mind the way I am teaching the simulation is for the first few rounds, and in some classes it's 4, some it's 5, we're just going to practice. Everyone's going to have their own practice simulation to run so that you understand how to do some of these functions, since these are the things that you're translating from the real world into the simulation. So sit back and relax, watch the second video. Maybe it might be a good idea in another screen to have the simulation signed on so you can see some of the screens they're talking about. Don't worry, we'll help you along with everything you need to get through the simulation. Thanks, and watch this.
Welcome to the Sim Professionals LLC video presentation discussing some of the rules governing our project management simulation, Sim for Projects. Albert Einstein once said, "You have to learn the rules of the game, and then you have to play better than anyone else." Sim for Projects is a project management simulation that brings together the elements of project management into a detailed and challenging web-based environment. The simulation has been created as an experiential exercise for the classroom. Teams compete against each other to complete the same project. In order to maintain consistency for the class participation, the simulation is governed by a strict set of rules. The purpose of this video is to discuss some of those rules. The video is meant to supplement your reading of the manuals posted at www.simforprojects.com and is not meant to replace reading the manuals. Rule number 1 is to read the Player Quick Start Manual at www.simforprojects.com. To begin with, we will look at submitting decisions. Teams submit decisions, but only your instructor can process those decisions. Once you make decisions, you submit them by clicking on the Submit Decisions button. Generally, you will be able to see the results within an hour after processing. Your instructor will provide a schedule of when your decisions are due. If your team does not submit decisions on time and your instructor processes, the simulation will make random decisions for your team. During the play of the simulation, you are able to make 4 types of decisions: hire and fire resources, assign resources to a task, assign resources to a training class, take various managerial actions. Now we will take a look at decision-making periods. There are a maximum of 12 decision-making periods for your project. You may play fewer rounds depending on the length of your course, and you may play more if your instructor uses pre-play. Your instructor will provide the schedule for your class. Periods for the simulation are not measured in a traditional manner, such as weeks or months. A period, in essence, is a set of tasks. As such, the required tasks for each period must be completed by each team, and each team will start the next period at the same point on the Gantt chart. The results for each team are calculated after each decision-making round. The only difference will be that, as reflected by the time score, it will have taken each team a different amount of time to complete the tasks. Moving forward, we will look at the rules for hiring and firing resources. There is a pool of virtual resources from which you can staff your project. These resources are defined by the type or category, for example, engineer. There is a sufficient number of resources available to ensure that all teams can hire the resources they need. However, remember that bidding for resources is competitive among the teams. Just because there are sufficient resources available in the pool does not mean that you will be successful in your bidding. When you click on the name of an available resource, you will be presented with information about that resource. This information ranges from attributes such as experience, education, and work ethic to personal data such as age, gender, and cultural background. All of the factors for each resource ultimately enter into the scoring metric. Resource rules to consider. There is a table in the system that defines the optimal number of each category of resource, for example, engineers, that you should need to complete your project. That number is always 1 or 2. You are allowed to hire up to 2 times the optimal number, but you will be restricted by the software if you try to hire more. You may only bid for available resources. You cannot hire a resource away from another team. You will be notified in the results section if you were successful with your bid for a particular resource. This notice is provided after your instructor processes the team decisions. You cannot hire and assign a resource in the same period. If you need a resource in a particular period, you must have a resource strategy to hire that resource no later than the previous period. If you are the successful bidder for a resource, that resource will be placed on your team when you start play for the next period. However, if you fire a resource, they are removed from your team as soon as you submit that decision. The standard rate for each resource is only a guideline. You may bid more than the rate or less. However, there is a minimum rate and you are not provided with that amount. If you bid less than a resource's minimum rate, even if there are no other bidders for that resource, the resource will turn down your offer. All categories of resources can perform all tasks, just not equally well. There is a table in the software that defines what category of resource is best suited for each task. This is the effectiveness measurement in the simulation. If you fire a resource, you may not hire that particular resource back for 2 periods. Now let's take a look at the rules for training resources. Every resource has 9 attributes such as experience, education, work ethic, and training. When you assign a resource to a task, the simulation uses these attributes to rate the efficiency at which the resource completes the task. You have the ability to send a resource to training in order to modify one or more of their attributes and perhaps make them more efficient. When you click on the name of a course, you'll be provided with information about this course. That includes quantitative data such as cost. Training takes place first in a period. If you send a resource to training and also assign them to a task that period, they cannot start to work on that task until they have finished the training class. Additionally, just as in the real world, your budget is charged with the resource's salary while they are in training. Moving on, we will look at mandatory decisions. You may make the 4 decisions we discussed earlier. However, the only decision you must make each period is to assign resources to all of the tasks for the period. While you may generally be making hiring and/or firing decisions each period, they are not required. The reason is that you may already have the resources on your team that you are going to assign to the tasks. Likewise, just as it happens on a real project, you are not required to send anyone to training or to take any of the managerial actions. Moving on, we will take a look at the unallocated resources or bench penalty charges. In the real world, if you hired a resource and did not use them for a task, you would still be required to pay their salary. The authors discovered that if we charged teams for 100% of the salary for someone sitting on the bench, it would potentially have a devastating effect on the team budget and rankings. In order to reinforce the concept of a bench penalty, the following rule was established. You must assign all the virtual resources on your team to a task or to training for at least 25% of the elapsed time each period. If you do not, the simulation will charge your budget up to 25% of that resource's salary. If you assign a resource for less than 25%, the charge to your budget will be the amount needed to bring it up to 25%. Please note, this explains the rule about the unallocated resource cost, not the strategy behind potentially carrying someone on the bench. You may have a resource management strategy that willingly carries someone on the bench. You may absorb the bench penalty rather than fire that resource. There is no right or wrong. There is just the implementation of a strategy and the consequences of your decisions. Lastly, here are some comments from our authors. There are no shortcuts to learning the rules for playing the simulation. This video discusses many of those rules, however, it is not intended to replace a careful reading of the player's Quick Start Manual. Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoy the simulation.